Hello, welcome back to the podcast. There is a good chance you may hear my cats in the background because they've decided that now is snuggle time. That was Beatrix. I am your host, Naomi, and this is Mosaic in Progress. As always, check the show notes for content and trigger warnings for the episode, but I'm just going to give a verbal upfront that this episode may be very triggering for those who were raised in the church, especially women raised in the evangelical church, because there's going to be a lot of talk about self-worth and how that was addressed in the church. So last week's episode talked about manifestation and letting go, and this week we're going to talk about a related topic, which is self-worth and boundaries. And if you don't immediately recognize the correlation, stand by, stay tuned. You're going to. So I'm going to start with kind of a little background of my own journey with self-worth and boundaries. And the thing that I learned as I learned how to set boundaries is that, one, you can't set boundaries if you don't know where you're at. And two, you can't set boundaries if you don't think you deserve to have protection or that you are someone who has the power to set boundaries. So self-worth and self-knowledge plays a huge role in setting boundaries, and I honestly really learned about boundary setting with the book Boundaries, which is a very heavily religious book. It is written from a Christian perspective. It relies heavily on biblical teachings and knowledge, and the correlations of boundaries are taken directly from the Bible. It is not a helpful book for anyone outside of the church. I was given the book by someone who was agnostic, and they had read it and they said it's helpful in a way, but it was way too preachy for me. I read it while I was still in the church, and I found it very helpful at the time. It is not something that I would find helpful at this stage in my life just because of all of the biblical ties that the book has. But if you're someone who can overlook that, or if you're someone who is still in the church, highly recommend reading it, because honestly, that book is where I learned how to set boundaries. But backing up, I grew up believing that the only thing that gave me worth was that I had a soul, that God created me, and Jesus died for me. I did not believe I had any intrinsic worth as a human being, that all of my worth came from association with a divine creator. And not in the, we're all part of him, he created us so we have worth, like he could take my worth away. And it took me a really long time to see anything about myself as good that wasn't strictly related to my life as a Christian, my walk as a Christian. And I remember in my early 20s just reaching this conclusion that I was garbage, and people would compliment me or say I was really good at something or I was a good person, especially if they told me I was a good person, and I would argue with them. I would contradict them, and I would say, no, I am worthless. I am nothing but a worm. The only reason that anything about me is good is because Jesus died for me. I would literally say that. Those words. And I believed them. And I look back on that and just the brainwashing that happened that led me to that conclusion. And it's funny to me that I thought that the church was a loving environment when I was essentially taught to hate myself and everything that made me me. So, as I started this kind of journey of learning to love myself and learning to appreciate who I was as a person, I was overwhelmed with guilt about it. And I remember feeling so vain and selfish and worldly. If you were not someone who grew up in the church, worldly is about the worst insult that you can get. It means that you're not acting like a Christian. You're acting like all the others, the world. But I remember just really struggling with this idea that I could love myself. And I tried to tell myself, you're someone who God created. If He loved you, shouldn't you love yourself? And it was not, for some reason, it was not an easy transition. It wasn't an easy mind shift. And you would think that it would be based on everything that I was taught, but allowing myself to believe that there was something good about myself, that I was worth something, that I deserved good things. It was so contrary to everything that I had been raised with that when I started talking to my mother about it and from a biblical perspective explained her why I should love myself and why I was worthy, she argued with me and warned me, cautioned me against being too vain or arrogant. Similarly to how she cautioned me against thinking too well of myself, getting arrogant, haughty, etc., to love my body as it was. And I pointed out, if God created me, I don't do a whole lot extra to my body. I don't do a lot of working out or plastic surgeries or wearing lots of makeup or lots of things with my hair or I don't do a lot. It is what it is. It's, kind of in its default state with a few minor adjustments. And I said, if I think that it's beautiful, that's just admiring God's creation in the same way that you might admire a sunset or a flower. I didn't do this. And she was angry with me over it. And it led to a fight. And that is where my boundary setting really started taking place with my family. I started realizing that I could not talk about biblical things with my parents. And this was before I had fully acknowledged the extent of their abuse. And I was still trying to have a relationship with them. And I realized that they were absolutely not interested in the truth. They weren't interested in hearing other perspectives. They weren't interested in challenging themselves. They just wanted to be right. And they were very confident that they were currently right. So there was no reason for them to challenge those beliefs at all. And so for myself, and it wasn't a big boundary in the sense of I had to have a fight with them about it. It was mostly a boundary for myself to stop myself from a certain behavior. I realized that conversations discussing right and wrong, what the Bible really says, challenging my current perspectives that they had given me, just weren't topics. They weren't things that were healthy for me to discuss with them, to engage in those conversations with them. And so I stopped. Almost completely quit having any discussions with them at all about my beliefs or their beliefs or just philosophical or religious discussions in general, which may not sound like a big deal, but that was almost the entirety of my relationship with them, was having those conversations. So to stop that meant that our relationship went from a pretty deep spiritually focused relationship to an extremely superficial one that was intermittent at best. And setting that boundary with them kind of became the root that grew the tree that eventually led to me having pretty much no relationship with them. I have no relationship with my dad at all anymore. I haven't spoke to him in almost 2 years now. And my relationship with my mom is pretty much just a monthly or so text message. And I held a lot of guilt about that for a long time because I was raised, that they're your parents, you respect them, you take care of them when they get old. I actually went into nursing partly. I had the idea that I needed to have a stable career so that I could financially support them when they got older, and they had a lot of health problems, so I thought that I should get a job that would give me knowledge to be able to take care of them better and help them better when they got older. And I went from planning my life around taking care of them in their old age to having almost no relationship with them overnight, pretty much. And a big part of that was because I gained an understanding of my worth and what boundaries were for. Because I don't owe anyone my time. I don't owe anyone access to me. I don't owe anyone a relationship with me. It doesn't matter who you are or how we're related or what the past has been. If you are someone who is toxic for me or just toxic in general, I don't have to give you time out of my life. I don't have to give you access to me. And one of the things that I did is that after, maybe a year or so of a superficial relationship, they really weren't talking to me at all. They never contacted me to ask about my life or how I was doing or check on me in any way. And it was around the same time that I set the boundary of no more deep discussions, I realized that I was the one who was doing most of the reaching out. And I decided to try an experiment, and I didn't text them first for a good 6 months or better, just to see how often I would actually hear from them. And I would go months without hearing from them at all. They never reached out to me. And I would hear from people at the church I was going to, or my sisters, that they were gossiping about me behind my back. They were talking bad about me and judgmentally of things that I would post on Facebook or things they heard that I was doing. But they never confronted me directly. They just talked about me behind my back. And it was at that point that I blocked them on Facebook, because I decided that if you cannot reach out to me, if you can't have a relationship with me, but you're going to talk about me, you don't deserve access to my life. You don't get to spectate my life via social media. So I blocked them. And I waited for them to confront me over it. And it's been almost 3 years and they've never said a single thing to me. They said things to other people, but not to me. And that has become kind of a metric for me to judge who is healthy for me to be in my life. Are you someone who will speak to me directly about a problem, who will confront the problem, or are you just going to gossip about me? Are you just going to backbite? Are you going to judge me and tell other people about it without confronting me? And if you're someone who is like that, I am going to severely limit your access to me, if not cut it off entirely, because that's unhealthy. And I know myself enough and love myself enough to now know and believe that I deserve healthy relationships in my life. And I deserve to set boundaries. I have the power to set boundaries as far as who has access to me and who gets to be in my life. And this is honestly where the self-worth comes in with boundaries, because for a long time I felt like I owed them everything because they gave me life. And I think it's a really hard thing, especially when you grow up with toxic and narcissistic parents, to realize that you owe your parents respect in the basic sense of respecting other humans. And that's about it. Anything beyond that is solely based on how they cultivate the relationship, because they have the responsibility as the adults to cultivate a healthy relationship. And if they don't do that, if they're abusive to you, if they're neglectful of you, then when you become an adult, the only thing you owe them is goodbye. Because you don't have to keep people like that in your life just because they gave birth to you or donated sperm to create you. That doesn't give them any kind of hold over you, any kind of access that they're owed. They're not owed anything. And we get that twisted a lot in our society. We think that just because someone is a parent, that you have to do this or that for them or with them, and you don't. Some people are really shitty parents, and the best thing that they can give their children is distance to heal from everything they did to them. I didn't believe that I deserved a good life. I didn't believe that I deserved freedom from them. I didn't believe that I deserved healthy relationships. I didn't believe that I deserved peace. Quite frankly, I didn't even know really what peace was, because I had never truly experienced it. And breaking away from them was one of the hardest things that I did, but it became one of the most healing things that I did. And I don't regret it. I regret that they were not better parents. I regret that they have no remorse for their abuse. I regret that they are still manipulative and toxic. I regret that I don't really have a family now and never will. But I don't regret setting the boundaries, because the boundaries were necessary. Boundaries are necessary for healthy relationships. Even if you have a good relationship with someone, having boundaries with them is necessary for the relationship to remain healthy. My best friends do not have 24/7 access to me that is guaranteed. They can always call or text or Snapchat or whatever at any time of day or night, and they know this, but they also know that I may not respond. Now, if they are having an emergency and needed me, they know how to get in touch with me to make sure that I get the message. But they are completely aware that I'm not constantly available, and I don't expect them to be either. It's unhealthy to expect someone to be always available for you, no matter what, and to be unreasonable in the expectation that sometimes they need distance, sometimes they need space, sometimes they have things to do, sometimes they need alone time, or whatever. Understanding that you are separate from another person is a boundary. This is where I end and you begin. We're very close. We may live together. We may talk to each other constantly. We have each other's backs, but that does not mean that we are one and the same and that you are to always be available whenever I have a need. That's codependency. That's unhealthy. And recognizing that and loving yourself enough to not be someone's enabler for codependency is healthy. So I think the challenge becomes, how do we find our self-worth? How do we develop our self-worth? And how do we set boundaries following that? How do we live our lives as worthy people when our whole lives we have been led to believe that we were not worthy? It's a big challenge. It's a hard shift to make. And in order to do it, You have to get really honest with yourself about who you are. Why do I say this? Because as soon as you start saying, I am worthy, as soon as you start saying, I have intrinsic worth as a person, I deserve good things, there's this little voice in your head that's going to start telling you you're a liar. And it's going to start reminding you of all of your bad qualities, all of the bad things that you've ever done, and coming up with 1,000 different reasons why that's not true. So in order to fully embody your sense of self-worth, you have to accept all the bad parts of you too. And that doesn't mean you're going to stay stuck in your bad habits. That doesn't mean you're going to excuse your mistakes or the bad things that you may have done, people you may have hurt, whatever. It means that you're going to accept that that is you. That is a part of you. You are human. And love that part of yourself just as much as you would love it if it was another person who you loved. If your partner has bad habits or bad qualities or a bad past, you don't not love them because of those things. In the same way, you have to love yourself in spite of all your flaws. And because of all your flaws. Because the flaws are the things that make us human. My husband has a picture of his grandparents hanging in our parlor. And every time I look at it, I just think how happy his grandmother looks. And it hit me the other day. That is what strikes me about her. And that's what strikes me about him in the picture, too. They both look very happy. And they're all dressed up, you know. That was before camera phones and people actually would get annual professional pictures made and send them out to people. And they're old. It's an old picture. They're wrinkled. He has almost no hair. Her hair is white. She's fat. And her teeth look bad. And I never noticed that. But isn't that what we always notice about ourselves? And oftentimes, when we're being petty and small-minded, isn't that what we notice about other people too? We don't notice the joy. We don't notice the beauty. We don't notice the love. All we focus on is the flaws. Love yourself exactly as you are. With all your flaws and wrinkles and scars and crooked teeth or missing teeth or balding head or graying hair or bad habits or annoying proclivities or whatever it is. You are the only person who will be in your life for your entire life. If you don't love you, you will spend the entirety of your life searching for what you won't give yourself in other people. And other people are flawed, just like you. And they will only love you to the end of their ability to love you. It is a hard thing sometimes to accept that someone is doing their best and their best is not enough. But what if that person is you? What if you're the one not loving yourself enough? You are the only one who can change that. You can't change other people and you can't make other people change their behavior towards you. But you can change yourself. And as you change yourself, as you shift your attitudes, as you shift your energy, you become more humble. You become more understanding, more forgiving, more accepting of reality as it is, and less judgmental. That doesn't mean that you become a doormat and you just allow behaviors that aren't okay. It means that I can accept that you are doing your best, and also recognize that your best is not enough for me. And at that point, the boundary comes in. Do I continue to allow this? Do I continue to accept less than what I need? Or do I say, I need you to meet this mark in order for this relationship to continue? And if you can't meet that mark, I will walk away from you in love, but I will walk away. Boundaries are how we show ourselves love and how we show other people how to love us. Boundaries feel mean when you have been raised to allow whatever comes into your life. Boundaries feel mean when you have been abused and taught that you deserve whatever is given to you. But boundaries are one of the highest forms of love, because it says, I love myself enough to only allow love in. And it says, I love you enough to not allow you to treat me and this relationship like it's worthless. I am a part of this relationship too. I am not your doormat. I am not your maid. I am not someone you can use. We are in this relationship together, whatever the relationship is. And because we are in this relationship together, it is a give and a take. And if a relationship is all give and no take, it's not a relationship. It's an ATM. You are not an ATM. You are a person, and your relationships should be balanced. They should be symbiotic. And that doesn't mean that 100% of the time it's going to be 50-50 give and take. Because life happens, and sometimes you give more than you take, and sometimes you take more than you give. But if it is not a balance, if you're always the one doing the giving and not the taking, that is not a loving relationship. That is you being used. And to tell someone that you value the relationship enough to not be a doormat, and you value yourself enough to not be a doormat, is nothing but love. Because allowing someone to treat you like that is enabling them to be a bad person. Enabling bad behaviors, enabling harmful behaviors is not loving. As much as it often feels loving to protect someone from consequences, it is not. Consequences are the natural result of actions. Sometimes they're good, sometimes they're bad. They match whatever the actions are. If you're constantly fielding punches for someone, metaphorically or literally, that is not a loving way to behave. That is you allowing yourself to be the recipient of consequences intended for someone else. And that hurts you and the person who should be receiving the consequences. Because consequences are a necessary part of life. I think, especially for people raised in the church, it's really easy to logic that away. Well, Jesus died for us so that we didn't have to face the consequences we deserved. Why shouldn't I do that for someone else? Well, first of all, you're not Jesus. Second of all, there's a whole lot that could be said about the reality of that situation, but that was last week's episode. Or week before last. The deconstruction episode, whenever that aired. They all kind of start running together after a while. At any rate, there is nothing biblical that says it's a good idea for us as regular people to take on someone else's consequences. Sure, that's what Jesus did. That's not what we're called to do. And Jesus took eternal consequences, not worldly consequences. Jesus dying for sins didn't absolve someone of serving jail time for stealing. Though there are people who will try to argue that that should be the case. That's another subject. Once you develop your sense of self-worth, once you learn to accept and love yourself exactly as you are, where you are, your life becomes internally gentler because you're no longer at war with yourself. You're no longer trying to hide the ugly parts of you, the things that you don't accept, because you accept all of it. The ugly parts, the embarrassing parts, the things that you don't want other people to know, all of that. You love and accept as no one else can ever do because they don't know you like you know you. And once you're in that gentle, grounded space, everything else becomes clearer because it's no longer, I should just put up with this relationship because who else is going to love me? Because who else will accept me? Because I'm awful. You know and love yourself exactly as you are. And so any other relationship that enters into your life is a bonus. It's gravy. And if it's not, if it's bringing more stress than good things, if it's causing you more harm than it is bringing good into your life, then you are coming from a loving, grounded space to say, this is not what I want in my life. So either the relationship dynamic needs to change or I need to leave. And you are empowered to be able to walk away from what isn't serving you. You are the creator of your life. You are the most powerful person in your own life because you get to decide who gets to be a part of it, what gets to be a part of it. I think I may have mentioned in a previous episode that my first therapist told me I could be whatever I wanted to be. And it was not anything I ever heard as a child, but hearing it as an adult, I realized that she did not mean I could be an astronaut or president. She meant that I could be strong, I could be gentle, I could be loving, I could be guarded, I could be jaded, I could be closed off, I could be mean, I could be kind. I could be whatever I chose to be. And that is power. That is a power and a realization that will change your entire life. I chose to be loving because nothing else really matters if love is not a part of it. I think it is the entirety of the point of human existence is to embody love. I think love is true divinity. And as much as I can, with every conscious choice I make, for myself, for the people around me, for those who I influence, I try to do everything out of love. Not everyone perceives my choices in that way, because love isn't always roses and romance and notes and hugs and kisses and laughing. I've been working in healthcare for a really long time. Sometimes love is ugly and messy. Sometimes love is painful. Sometimes love is your back hurting because you slept for 3 nights in a chair. Because your husband has ICU psychosis. And in order to keep him from having to be tied down or extra staff having to be used, you stay with him because you're the only one who can keep him calm. Sometimes love is letting someone sign a DNR. Sometimes love is standing by someone while they're having a GI bleed and the entire room reeks of everything that's coming out of your body, and staying there anyway. Sometimes love is checking someone into rehab. Sometimes love is kicking someone out of your house because you know as long as you are enabling them and making them comfortable, they will continue making poor choices and hurting themselves and the people around them. And you are the ingredient that is keeping that happening. Boundaries are the ultimate love. Setting boundaries is almost impossible until you learn to truly love yourself. I hope that this episode has been helpful for you in some way. That is always my goal. That someone sees themselves in something that I've said and feels less alone, feels empowered, feels at least heard, seen. And I hope you will join me on the podcast next week as we both continue to work on our mosaic in progress. Please don't forget to follow wherever you listen to podcasts. Follow us on social media. We're on Instagram and Facebook. We are available wherever you listen to podcasts. And I so appreciate all of you who listen and who interact with podcasts or interact with us on social media. It means more to me than I can ever put into words. I will see you all next week back here.